Season 4 has only 2 more episodes left and only 2 more questions left to answer. Did Sazz get murdered because of a Hollywood secret or because she knew the answer to the Season 1 plot holes? Okay, wait, that sounds like 2 questions, but that's really just 1 question. A Hollywood secret or a Season 1 plot hole? Okay, the second question left to answer. How did stuntman Glen know where Charles lived? Like he went straight to Charles's apartment. Had he been there before, like moving Zazz's body? Okay, that's also 2 questions. Sorry, so there's also, if Helga did nothing wrong, why did Vince Fish cross her face out of a photo? Like she had done something wrong and he never wanted to see her again. Okay, yeah, that's more questions. But yeah, and what are the odds that 2 different bodies with the exact same shoulder replacement joint end up in the incinerator for 2 different reasons by coincidence? And should we give the shooter who hit Sazz across a courtyard in a dark apartment and then hit Glen from outside the studio, should we give that person a gold medal? And who are these actors playing Howard, Uma, and Lester in the movie version? What became of the gun that Detective Williams took? Did stuntman Glen confuse Marshall with Mabel? Or did he confuse Marshall with this PA from the film set? Why would Helga leave a pet behind if she thought the Westies were killers? Who made the noise that the podcast trio heard in Sazz's apartment? Wasn't the FBI involved? How could they have not realized that the shoulder joint was from Dudenoff? Aren't the podcast trio and the celebrities now accessories to a crime? Who's left-handed? Who's right-handed? Who wrote the note? Where is Jan? What's the guy's name on first base? Who shot Sazz? Let's solve Only Murders in the Building, Season 4, Episode 8, Lifeboat. We'll be breaking down each episode for clues, suspects, red herrings, left hands, and other things to learn who shot Sazz and who shot Glen. Spoilers for the first 3 seasons and the first 8 episodes of Season 4. If you haven't seen all these episodes, you know what to do. Pause the video, turn on an old episode of Who's the Boss, and then... Oh, sorry guys, I just got a ding-dong. And then come back and watch. Use the timestamps below to jump to the topic or suspect that you want to hear about and skip past stuff you don't want to hear. This season has been so fun. Have you had fun? I've been having a whole lot of fun this season. Go down in the comments. Let's celebrate everything that's fun. And we have to remember how fun this show is when some unfun things happen around the show. And I'm going to talk about those right at the top. As much as we love this show, this video podcast is trying to review the show as a fair play murder mystery. Sometimes this show is less than a fair play murder mystery, sometimes not very logical. The first one that jumps to my head in this case is in Season 1. Everybody said, ooh, the Demuses, Teddy and Theo killed Tim Kono. Okay, you know who should really love that? The killer Jan. Jan should be like, yes, Tim Kono was killed by the Demuses. But Jan acts completely crazy, and of course Jan is crazy, but is suddenly like, no, I don't think Teddy and Theo did it. That doesn't make sense. And so sometimes this show doesn't make sense. And the latest one is the retcon of the End the Podcast note. Many of you may know this, but if you watch the original version of the End the Podcast note, there's no such thing as a smudge on it in the upper left-hand corner. That's not true. So the show is retconning something to have it make sense. And to come up with the idea of, oh, this was written by a left-handed person. To me, it's kind of not fun because it shows that the writers really, if they've been planning this from the beginning, they really haven't been planning it out that well, that they have to retcon and say, ooh, look at this smudge, it was written by a left-handed person. The show does this kind of stuff sometimes. It's a fun show, let's ignore it. Let's keep it having fun in our comments and on social media. But then there's more unfun stuff, and that's spoilers. So there's not going to be any spoilers right now. There is going to be, yes, yet again, another spoiler section at the end of this video. But for right now, I want to talk about avoiding spoilers. You have to watch out. You have to watch out for spoilers. They are out there and they are thick and fast. I don't like spoilers. I don't want to see them. But before the season, I read a review by critic Alan Sepinwall where he mentioned, hey, actor Griffin Dunne is going to play a character in Season 4 who's oft mentioned. Now, the review didn't say that Griffin Dunne was Professor Dudenoff, but it was really kind of easy to put 2 and 2 together, and so it was a spoiler. I got spoiled before anything happened. So why did these spoilers happen? Well, there are a lot of shows, a lot of streaming services. The marketing teams need to stand out. Why would would the marketers give out 7 episodes? Well, they want people to write about Melissa McCarthy appearing in this show as Charles's sister. They want people to interview her, to talk about her. They got to get the word out that this big star Melissa McCarthy's in it. So they give out 7 episodes. Well before the season was available on streaming and before you and I could see it. So those 7 episodes, they were out there. And people who had watched those 7 episodes, they knew, the End the Podcast Note is going to come back. And so those spoilers were kind of out there, either in reviews like Alan Sepulwall's, or people on Reddit and other things were kind of dropping clues. About 3 weeks ago, the show released episodes 8 and 9, and possibly 10 to critics and influencers. Why would they do that? Well, again, the marketing team needs articles written. You may remember these type of articles drop when the final episode drops. So when season 3's final episode dropped, there was this article, we interview the killer of season 3. How did they do it? Because the critics and the influencers already had seen the episode. They knew who the killer was. They could set up an interview with the killer where they could talk to them about scenes in season 3, and so that's why they're doing it. Sadly, one thing that happens is this stuff kind of gets out there, so we got to be careful. The spoilers are out there. I've accidentally been spoiled on something else big for this year, and I'm going to talk not necessarily the biggest spoiler in the spoiler section coming up, but kind of what I would call a mid-range spoiler. It doesn't say, this person shot Sazz, but it's another thing I wish wasn't out there. I'm going to talk about it at the end because I feel like we want to talk about everything here. But if you know more spoilers, don't put them in the YouTube comments. Don't do anything. This kind of middle grade spoiler we're going to talk about, leave it at that. Don't go deeper into this middle grade spoiler we're going to talk about at the end of the podcast. Time for the Double C credit clues. The opening credits Easter egg is the power flickering like the incinerator was set off. In the closing credits, you're going to see the movie sign Mean Cold Meat, the Lady Longoria, and Eugene Levy as Brazos. This week's episode is titled Lifeboat, after the 1944 American film directed by Hitchcock from a story by John Steinbeck. The film is entirely set on a lifeboat launched from a freighter which had been torpedoed and sunk by a Nazi U-boat. Ooh boy. This film, I think, is incredibly underrated. I saw it. I loved it. It's in my top 5 Alfred Hitchcock films of all time. Maybe my top 4. I mean, it's really good. Now, there isn't a lot of action in it. It's literally set on the lifeboat. Nothing else. We're on the lifeboat the whole film. So there isn't like a big chase scene, right? It's on a lifeboat. But it is tense. Is there a Nazi on the boat? You wonder about. Where are we going? Where are we going to row to now that our ship is sunk? Ooh, tense, thrilling. If you love Alfred Hitchcock movies, go see Lifeboat. It's great. You've heard me talk about it all this season. We are desperately trying to please the YouTube algorithm gods and get to 10,000 subscribers. That's our goal. If you haven't already, please click subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. It takes a second, and it really just helps us out a whole lot. Before we run down the suspects, let's see what episode 8 taught us about the victim, actor stunt double Sazz Pataki. Sazz was speaking to Helga on the ham radio, and Sazz knew about all the plot holes in the first season of the podcast. Sazz was a stunt person on this film, and I'm going to mispronounce it, Project Ronkonkoma. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm pretty sure it's out on Long Island, maybe near Doreen's house. Sazz told Helga about this person she was working with. He's dangerous and he's going to be the death of me. It's implied that she was speaking of Glen, the stuntman. Now let's look at the suspects, and let's start with Glen Stubbins. He is moving. He's alive. The bullet bounced off his head, and it was a sniper bullet. It would be very difficult for him to shoot himself in the head. Glen, I'm not saying he isn't the killer or one of the killers, but at the very least, he didn't shoot himself. Let's get to the Westies, and their story just keeps expanding and taking twists and turns. The Sazz family, Alfonso, he and his wife ran a restaurant, and they became accustomed to Professor Dudenoff through the restaurant. In fact, I would think a restaurant Friday night would be busy, but sometime Friday night, maybe after the restaurant closed, they would go to Professor Dudenoff's apartment and play the Oh Hell card game. Now, this really does feel very close to what Sazz did with Charles and the stunt people back on the original run of Brazos. Pull a bunch of people together, form a card game, and form like a found family. He threatens the podcast trio and the celebrities with his big machete, his big knife, not a sniper rifle. Vince Fish. After Vince Fish's wife died, he promised not to turn into a weird, lonely old man. Well, 1 out of 3 ain't bad. And so he took Dudenoff's film class, he bonded with the professor over the classic It's a Wonderful Life, he was drinking booze with his professor. This is the best college ever. Vince got pulled into the oh hell game, he became friends with everybody, he lived in the Arconia, and he's the one who keeps the evidence of Professor Dudenoff's death. Rudy, he lies all the time because he can't handle the truth. He didn't have a girlfriend, but he did have an acting class with Professor Dudenoff, and he got invited to become one of the people sub-renting apartments at the Arconia. Professor Dudenoff, when his wife was alive, he grabbed up all the apartments in the Arconia, and he dreamed of moving maybe with his wife to Portugal. His wife passed away. He was going to pass away. He didn't want his friends to be kicked out on the street, and so he came up with this scam to keep himself alive, to live on forever. What do you guys think of Professor Dudenoff? Do you like his story? Are you happy about his story? What do you think of the late, possibly great professor? Helga, ooh, look at her. Why was her face crossed off? I mean, we didn't know her. I think they could have had her face not crossed off. Helga helped Mabel pull a ding-dong. Helga's father had taught her not only the locksmith business, but also the classic Oh Hell game, which is how she got brought in to be part of the family. When it came time for Professor Dudenoff to pass this mortal coil, he didn't want Helga to see it because her father had passed. Helga now is reunited with Hammy Faye Baker. Helga is almost a deus ex machina for, oh, by the way, here's some new information which is going to send the investigation in a whole new direction. We should note that Helga's name was on Sazz's desk written on a plane ticket from LA to New York. If you really zoom in on the ticket, this ticket looks like it's for Sazz, not Helga's plane ticket. But still, Helga's name is written on a plane ticket tying LA and New York together. Bev Melon. Now, I know what you're thinking. Bev wasn't in this episode. No, she wasn't. But we're going to go outside the source for almost a mini tinfoil hat theory on Bev. In a new article on the website TV Line, there's an article called Only Murders in the Building's Long Game is Coming into Focus. Who's been after our trio since season 1? At the very bottom of the article, they note that co-creator John Hoffman said, the idea of discounting a suspect feels fruitless, truthfully. Feels fruitless? Is this a Bev Melon call out? What do you guys think? I don't think we have to talk too much about the 3 celebrities this week. They were all brilliant. Eugene Levy's Who's the Sauce made me laugh so much. Eva Longoria's product, would you use it? Hey, I need to get rid of some wrinkles. Give me that face gun. Loretta Durkin. Loretta and Oliver are getting married this weekend. Wow, the story is moving fast. Weddings demand spectacles, and weddings are the most important part of a marriage, according to Zach Galifianakis. Most everybody has been very positive on Loretta and Oliver's relationship, but I have had some feedback saying, we don't need Loretta, we just need Oliver 24/7. What do you guys think? Are you happy for Oliver's second chance at love? Charles's sister Doreen. After I published the video podcast last week, I noticed something, and Billy Spocket Life on YouTube sent me this feedback too. Look at Doreen's room. It's not tinsel, but could it be a pom-pom? Like one of the dolls in Doreen's house who hold silver pom-poms. Pom-poms, a simple Google search will show, are not flammable. Could this be it? Was young Anna in cheerleading back then? Could she have had a pom-pom? What do you guys think? Have we found out the identity of the non-tinsel tinsel? Oliver Putnam, and here's another bit of feedback. Cheeser8988 wrote, and they said, I found something that I'm not sure has been found yet. In Season 3, Episode 2, Oliver says Putnam never taps out. Yet this season, we're seeing a whole tap in. Oliver doesn't tap out, but Charles taps in. Ooh, I love that. It's perfect. I would call it adorable bologna loaf good. Charles Hayden Savage. Charles, across the 4 seasons, has run the gamut of emotions. Finally, we see pure anger. What is your favorite angry Charles moment, even if he can't conjure that anger all the time? Bloody Mabel Mora. I mentioned this at the top, but who's going to explain to the FBI, yeah, Dudenoff, there's no idea how his replacement shoulder joint ended up in the incinerator. Plus, here's another question. When Mabel signed that contract with Bev, didn't she get a good amount of money? Couldn't she afford her own apartment in the Arconia now? Or is it best to crash with the Westies? In this week's tinfoil hat theory, we're going to have to go to the retcon left-hand theory. and go even deeper into it. First up, Detective Williams. Now, would Detective Williams poison a dog? That does not seem in character with her at all, but of course, that's what an evil person would want us to think. Here is Detective Williams writing with her left hand. This is what the handwriting looks like. It doesn't really match the end the podcast note, but Detective Williams is a left-handed person. Why would she do it? Well, Detective Williams met the podcast trio in the very first episode. They weren't doing a podcast then, but she knows them. She would be paying attention to them. She was involved with investigating the Tim Kono death. Now, Detective Williams leaving an "I'm watching you" note on Jan's door, to me that doesn't make so much sense. If she was watching Jan and suspecting Jan, she might have been proactive in actually investigating her and preventing her from poisoning Charles and almost destroying the Arconia. What do you think? A lot of people in the comments have been leaving Detective Williams. Boy, I hope this is not a spoiler, but people saying, what about her? What about her? Well, she is left-handed, okay? I'll give you that. It doesn't logically make sense to me that she would be the villain in this case, but suppose it's possible. And if you have a great kind of motive for why she would do this, go down in the comments and let us know. Our next left-handed suspect is Cinda Canning. Cinda Canning has a lot of pros and a lot of cons. Would Cinda Canning, by season 1, episode 3, have heard of the Only Murders in the Building podcast enough to poison Winnie and leave a note on Oliver's door? Yeah, doesn't seem logical, does it? But we know Cinda Canning is left-handed. Here she is writing this for Mabel. She is using her left hand. She is sus. Now, why would she do it? We know she's very competitive. We know she has her racket and she doesn't want anybody stepping on her racket. Let's come up with some motives. Why would Cinda Canning somehow be involved in leaving these notes? Okay, Howard. Now, we've already talked about Howard. I talk about Howard so much that people say, stop talking about Howard. But as I pointed out last week, in season 2, episode 3, we see Howard writing with his right hand. Now, does that mean Howard wouldn't be able to be ambidextrous and write with both? No, of course he could. Could it be Howard? Now, a big reason why it wouldn't be Howard is when all the podcast trio were receiving those text messages saying, I'm watching you, Howard was working the camera. So it wasn't like he was working the camera and then could be sending it from his phone that he's got, right? That would be a stretch even for this show. Lester the doorman is a really interesting idea. Lester has been in every season. He's always kind of around. He has keys so he can get into anybody's apartment. Probably a big thing to think about is how Lester's always so helpful. And in some ways, isn't the person with the phone a bit helpful? Hey, Oliver, something spilled on your rug. Here's a rug pad thing that I'm texting to your phone. You know, you could see Lester doing it. A couple of times, I should note, we do see Lester answer the phone in the lobby of the Arconia using his left hand. Yet at the same time, a time we see Lester eating cake, he has the fork in his right hand. According to IMDb, Lester has appeared in 16 episodes of Only Murders in the Building. I went and watched all 16 of these. In scenes where he's like the main focus, he doesn't write anything at all. Maybe there's a scene of him in the background writing, but I couldn't find it. So anybody who claims Lester is a lefty, tell me where that scene is. I couldn't find it. Another possible thing against Lester is if you look at this thing found on Sazz's desk that says West Tower with the infamous backwards 3. Doesn't it almost look like a luggage tag, like something they would put on the front desk where it would read, "This needs to be delivered to the West Tower"? There's one more item that Lester, being the note writer, could possibly solve. And that's in season 1, Charles and Oliver are chasing after Mabel, who's gone off with Oscar, the tie-dye guy. And Lester runs up and says, "Oh, Charles, here's your hat." And Charles says, "Oh, I thought I lost it." It felt like they were filming an insert for a continuity error they were about to make. But perhaps that's a sign that Lester could go into Charles's apartment and take stuff. Teddy Demas would be another interesting one to see which hand he uses. Certainly, he wrote checks to Oliver for the podcast in season 1, and he must have written things for his son Theo to read. Yet I couldn't, in my quick scanning of his episodes, I couldn't find scenes of him with a pen in his hand. Who else would be a good lefty to leave these notes? I don't know about you, but we love Detective Williams, love Lester, love Howard. Cinda Canning, we even kind of like. She's very funny. Are any of these people the person you want to have written the note? Let's hear it. Uma, does anybody know what hand Uma uses? Let's hear him. Who do you think could do it? Now let's get to your feedback. And in your feedback, I was asking, who do you want to see in season 5? We had so much wonderful feedback. I'm going to pull some, but know that there's way more in the comments everywhere. Ella wrote, bring back Theo and Teddy Demas. Vanessa said, a Theo and Teddy Demas comeback is necessary. The show is much better with them. Artemis said, I want everybody back, but mostly Theo. Victoria said, I would love to see Lucy and Theo back. Robert Lacey said the superfans, and Metnolia also wrote, I want the superfans back on the show. Rebecca, ooh, this is cold. She says, I want everybody back except Taubert. Ouch. Super C wrote, Andrea Martin needs to come back. Shirley MacLaine too. Brianna wrote, I want Oscar the tie-dye guy back and Howard's actor boyfriend who was allergic to Cat Jonathan's. I want them back. Finally, Emily wrote, bring back Bugs and Porky from season 1. Heck yeah, Emily. Let's go. Let's get them all back. Gayleen wrote, Sazz's "There's a problem with your movie" message sounds like something she'd send if she had just discovered a problem herself. If Sazz wrote the script, as some speculate, it wouldn't be news to her that there was a problem. She'd have known, or at least suspected, from the moment she heard the movie was being made. Charlie wrote, Cookie's name is in the bodega ledger. Wow. Oh, here we go. So everybody, we all know that Charles dated a woman named Cookie. She ended up leaving him for Sazz, broke up with Sazz. Cookie's name is in this ledger. Here we go. How deep is this web gonna go? Valerie Kuhn, maybe she loves Cinda Canning being left-handed, because Valerie wrote, I haven't given up on the idea that Cinda Canning is behind the whole thing. Heck yeah. And finally, Molly wrote, if this all goes back to season 1, one old plot hole is sticking out to me. Jan's motive for killing Tim Kono was that she felt he was always putting somebody else first, which made Jan suspect cheating. This week, Charles's sister Doreen asked, why do we chalk big emotions up to being crazy? This made me realize that's exactly what I assumed with Jan. But what if she was right, and Tim was more focused on another relationship? Maybe the pigtail lady. Or was he another Dudenoff devotee? Both were involved in some shady financial activities. Could they be related? Love that question, Molly. Whew. This week's spoiler talk, I'm only going to touch this on the surface level because there are versions of this spoiler which make it go even deeper. So I'm not going to go too deep. Some people listen to spoilers and I personally think they're thinking, it won't be that big a spoiler. If you go down this rabbit hole, there are some big spoilers. So I'm just going to say it like this. Currently, there's a fun little promotion that Only Murders in the Building's marketing team is doing. You may remember last year they had the critic, Maxine Spear, they had a fake version of her review of Death Rattle Dazzle. And it was comical and kind of fun and probably appeared in Playbill and that kind of stuff. Right now, they have a page on Rotten Tomatoes about the audience score of the Only Murders in the Building, the movie that is being made this season on the show. So it's really fun. It's a fun spoof. They have a review written by Maxine of the movie. It's positive, a bit like her positive review of Death Rattle Dazzle. They even have silly audience reviews like this one from Howard Morris, I should have played myself in the movie, or Mabel Mora writing, my level of cringe is mercifully low. And so it's really fun. It's a fun marketing idea, but just don't even look at that page, people. Just accept that, okay, they're doing these fun things. If you're watching the video version of this podcast, you can see some of the screenshots, but don't dig any deeper because it really gets into some crazy, unfortunate spoilers. We've got 2 more episodes, guys. This is going to be thrilling. Next week, it's episode 9, Escape from Planet Klongo. Seeking a critical clue, Charles, Oliver, and Mabel must infiltrate a film set to get the real background on why Sazz was killed. Whew. Talk to you next week.